Chapter 1. The Road to Nowhere. The road was older than memory. It wound out of the town like a forgotten scar, the asphalt cracking into jagged veins that led nowhere people wanted to go. The street lamps that lined it had long since gone dark, their bulbs yellowed and hollow, leaning like crooked teeth above the path. Grass grew up through the fissures, wild and tall, as if trying to reclaim what had once been stolen from it. Most people in town avoided it after dark. A few drove it during the day, usually out of necessity, farmers cutting across fields, delivery trucks taking the shortcut, but none lingered. None stopped their cars to stretch their legs. None wandered off the shoulder to explore. Because there was something at the end of that road, and the locals swore it didn't like being disturbed. On a late autumn evening, as the sun bled away in slow orange streaks, a lone traveler found himself on that road. His name was David Carter, though he hadn't heard anyone call him David in years. To his friends, he was Carter, and to most strangers, he was just another man passing through. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't grow up with the whispered warnings of the town. To him, the road was simply a quicker way to reach the motel a few miles further along. The first mile felt ordinary enough, just cracked pavement and the quiet crunch of tires. But as twilight deepened, the air changed. The trees pressed closer together, their branches arching overhead, until the road seemed swallowed by a tunnel of black. Carter turned down his radio. He wasn't sure why. The silence felt thick, expectant. That was when he saw it. The house. It stood just beyond the tree line, perched on a small rise of ground, as though the earth itself had lifted it to be noticed. 2 stories tall, with a pitched roof and windows that reflected the last of the sun's fire. From a distance, it looked well kept. No holes in the roof, no broken shutters. Yet there was something uncanny about its perfection, as though it were only pretending to be abandoned. Carter slowed the car without meaning to. His hands had acted before his mind caught up. He stared at the house, drawn in by its stillness. The road curved away, urging him to keep going, but his headlights illuminated the gravel path leading up to the front steps. Something inside him, a small whisper of curiosity, or perhaps loneliness, murmured that he could stop, just for a moment, stretch his legs, see what was inside. After all, it wasn't every day you found a house like this, untouched by time. As he idled at the roadside, he noticed something else. The house's front door was ajar, only slightly, a crack wide enough to catch the dying light. Strange, he muttered to himself. He cut the engine. The sound of the motor faded into the heavy silence of the woods, and he realized he could hear the faintest creak, like wood shifting against wood in a rhythm too deliberate to be the wind. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove box and stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched beneath his boots, each step sounding louder than it should have. Behind him, the trees rustled, as though stirred by some unseen breath. The door waited ahead, open just enough to suggest invitation. For reasons he couldn't explain, Carter whispered as he reached the porch. "Hello?" The house sighed back through the groan of a floorboard somewhere deep inside. And then the silence swallowed him whole. Chapter 2. The Locals' Warnings. Hours before Carter ever set foot on the road, he'd passed through the last town on the map. A scatter of shops, one diner with a crooked neon sign, and a gas station where the pump nozzles rattled when they dispensed fuel. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and where strangers were noticed immediately. The diner had been nearly empty. A single waitress leaned against the counter, flipping through a gossip magazine, with pages so worn they looked translucent. Two men sat in the corner booth, caps pulled low, nursing mugs of coffee gone cold. Carter had slid into a booth near the window and ordered a black coffee. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes but a surprisingly kind smile, poured it without asking questions. She did, however, ask one thing after setting the cup down. "Where you headed?" Carter shrugged. "Just passing through. Got a motel reservation a few miles up." The waitress's smile faded a little. "Which way?" "West," he said. "Taking that old back road. Shorter." The two men in the corner stopped talking. They didn't look up, not exactly, but Carter felt their attention shift toward him. The waitress hesitated, her hand still on the coffee pot. "I wouldn't," she said softly. "Wouldn't what?" "Wouldn't take that road. Not after dark." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it. Like she wasn't offering advice, she was delivering a warning. One of the men in the corner cleared his throat. He was older, with a weathered face that looked like it had been carved from bark. "You're talking about the Miller place," he said, finally looking over. His eyes were pale, cloudy with age. "Ain't nothing good waiting down there." Carter gave a half smile, the kind people wear when they don't want to be rude, but also don't believe a word. "Ha! Haunted house story?" Neither man laughed. The other, younger by maybe a decade, leaned forward. "It ain't haunted. Not like you mean. It's worse." Carter sipped his coffee, pretending not to feel the prickling along his arms. "Worse how?" The men exchanged a glance. It was the waitress who finally answered. "People go missing out there. Always have. Kids who dare each other to spend a night. Drifters like you. Even a couple locals. They never come back. Or if they do..." She trailed off, biting her lip. The older man finished for her. "They ain't right after. Like the house keeps a piece of 'em." Carter chuckled, but it sounded hollow in his throat. Every town's got its ghost stories. "Maybe so," the waitress said, her tired eyes meeting his. "But not every story watches you back." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Carter left a few bills on the table, drained the last of his coffee, and told himself it was just small-town superstition. People liked their legends. They needed something to whisper about on long nights. But hours later, as he stood on that creaking porch and stared at the door ajar, those words came crawling back. Not every story watches you back. The floorboards sighed again inside the house. Chapter 3. The House in Waiting. The front porch groaned under Carter's weight. Paint peeled from the boards in long curls, and the railing was slick with moss where rain had licked it year after year. The door hung slightly open, a black slice of shadow inviting him into the hollow lungs of the house. He stood there longer than he meant to, his flashlight beam trembling across the threshold. He could almost turn back, almost walk down the path, get into his car, and keep driving to the safety of some motel where the only sounds were ice machines and muted televisions. Almost. But the silence of the place, it was magnetic. The kind that didn't just fill the air, but pressed against the skin. And beneath it all was that steady creak, like something rocking, like a rhythm waiting for him to match. Carter pushed the door open. The hinges shrieked, and dust bloomed in the air. The smell hit him first. Old wood, mold faint in the corners, and something else, something sweet, almost metallic. "Hello?" He called again, quieter this time. His voice came back to him, warped, like the house had swallowed it and spit it out slower. The entryway was wider than expected. A grand staircase rose to the second floor, the banister carved with patterns dulled by grime. To his left stretched what must have been a parlor, its furniture draped in sheets that sagged like tired shoulders. To his right, a dining room where the table still stood, long and skeletal, a single chair pulled out as though waiting for him. His flashlight swept across the walls, catching the faint shimmer of wallpaper peeling in strips. Beneath the peeling paper were faint scratches, too shallow to be letters but too deliberate to be chance. He leaned closer. Were they claw marks? Nails dragged in frustration? Something shifted upstairs. A slow wait, one step, then another. He froze, light jerking toward the staircase. "Anyone there?" Silence. Then, after a long pause, the same sighing groan of a floorboard, but closer now. Carter exhaled hard. Probably just the house settling. Old places do that. He said it aloud, though the sound of his own voice offered little comfort. He forced his feet to move. Past the dining room, through an archway, into what had once been a kitchen. Rusted pots hung from hooks. A clock above the stove had stopped at 3:17, hands unmoving, though the faintest ticking still sounded if he pressed his ear close. Too faint, too steady. In the center of the kitchen table lay a book. Thin, leather-bound, its pages yellowed and curled. A guest book, maybe, or a ledger. He brushed dust away and flipped it open. The first pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates, names, remarks, "Beautiful home, thank you for your hospitality." Then, further down the pages, the writing grew messier. Strange noises at night, couldn't sleep, the walls are moving. And later still, nothing but jagged scratches crossing the paper, tearing into the next pages. Carter snapped the book shut, pulse quickening, his flashlight beam quivered. The house groaned again, this time not from above, from directly behind him. He turned sharply, heart in his throat. The dining room doorway yawned empty, but the chair, the one pulled out, was no longer empty. It rocked. Slowly. Forward, back. Forward, back. No one sat in it, yet it rocked as though someone had just arisen to greet him. Carter's throat went dry. He whispered before he could stop himself. "Hello?" The rocking chair stopped, dead still, and the silence rushed back, heavy and waiting. Chapter 4. The Hall of Dust. Carter didn't move at first. His muscles locked, every nerve straining toward the chair that now sat perfectly still. He realized his own breath had synced with its rhythm. Inhale, exhale, forward, back. Now that it had stopped, he had to force air into his lungs. His instincts screamed at him to leave. Get back in the car, speed down the cracked road, and never look back. But the thought tangled with another. The diner, the pale-eyed old man, the waitress's tired warning. Not every story watches you back. If he left now, would the story follow? Carter tightened his grip on the flashlight and forced his legs to move. He stepped into the dining room again, closer to the table. Dust coated everything, soft as ash. He brushed his fingers across the wood, leaving behind streaks like scars. The chair remained motionless. Its carved legs were worn smooth, the seat cracked but sturdy. He touched the back of the chair, just a quick brush with his fingertips, and immediately pulled away. The wood was warm. He backed toward the archway that led deeper into the house. The beam of his flashlight revealed a long hallway stretching beyond the kitchen, narrow and choked with cobwebs. Doors lined either side. each one slightly ajar. The floor was carpeted in a thick layer of dust, except for a single path where the dust had been disturbed as though someone had walked through not long ago. "Anyone here?" Carter asked again, louder this time. His voice cracked against the walls and came back to him in whispers. He opened the first door on the left, a sitting room. Faded couches slumped beneath sheets, the outlines of forgotten photographs hanging crooked on the walls. He dared to lift one corner of the sheet. Beneath it, a cushion torn open, stuffing spilling like pale entrails. The next room was a study, a desk hunched beneath the window, its drawers pulled halfway out. Papers lay scattered across the floor, most too stained and brittle to read. One, however, caught his eye. A child's drawing, wax crayon scrawled in uneven lines. A house, tall and square, with windows blackened in. Beside it stood stick figures, too tall, too small, a family. And above the house, a crooked red sun. Something about the way the windows were filled in, scribbled so furiously that the paper had nearly torn, made his stomach twist. He folded the drawing and slipped it into his jacket pocket before he could think why. The hallway stretched on. Dust motes swirled in his flashlight's beam, disturbed by his passing. The silence felt heavier now, pressing down on him with every step, until even his heartbeat seemed too loud. At the far end of the hall, he found another door. Unlike the others, this one was closed tight. The knob was tarnished brass, cold against his palm. He turned it slowly, expecting resistance, but it opened smoothly into darkness. He swept the flashlight inside. A bedroom. The bed frame sagged, the mattress rotted through. Curtains hung limp, eaten by moths. On the bedside table sat another object, a mirror in a small wooden frame, its glass cracked down the center. As he lifted the mirror, the crack caught the light and split his reflection into two faces, overlapping. One was his own, the other wasn't. It was close, almost him, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the mouth curved into something that wanted to be a smile, but wasn't. Carter's stomach lurched. He dropped the mirror back on the table, and the sound rang through the house like a gunshot. From upstairs came the answer. Creak, 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 creak. The rocking chair had started again, and it was faster this time.
Chapter 5. The Rocking Chair. The creaking would not stop. Steady, deliberate, like a lullaby meant for no one. Carter stood frozen in the dust-choked bedroom, staring at the cracked mirror that had nearly shown him another face. His breath clouded faintly in the beam of the flashlight, though the air wasn't cold. The house was awake now. The sound above him picked up its rhythm, rocking forward and back. He tried to tell himself it was the wind. Maybe the draft pushed the chair. Maybe some trick of settling wood made the noise seem deliberate. But the explanation felt hollow in his head. Carter forced his boots to move. Out of the room, back into the hallway, every step stirring the dust that coated the carpet like frost. He paused at the bottom of the staircase, looking up. The light barely reached the landing, leaving the upper floor in a syrupy darkness that seemed thicker than it should have been. "All right," he whispered to himself, though his throat was dry. Just wood, just a house." The stairs moaned beneath him as he climbed. Each board groaned in protest, not like wood straining, but like a voice letting out long, tired sighs. He kept the flashlight trained ahead, though he had the sickening sense that if he glanced back, he'd see something waiting at the bottom. Halfway up, the rocking stopped. The silence crashed down again, sudden and suffocating. Carter froze, heart thundering, sweat prickled along his neck. He waited, breath shallow, ears straining. Nothing. He swallowed hard and pushed onward. The landing was narrower than it had looked from below. The hallway stretched long and uneven. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips, exposing the veins of the house beneath. Doors lined both sides, all but one closed tight. That one door gaped slightly, a crooked sliver of shadow spilling across the floorboards. From within came the faintest scrape. Carter raised the flashlight. The beam slid over the threshold, illuminating the corner of a room. A rocking chair stood there, facing away, its silhouette sharp against the faded wallpaper. It moved. Forward, back, forward, back. Empty. Carter stepped closer, his boots whispering across the boards. His breath grew shallow, his pulse a heavy drum in his ears. He could see the chair more clearly now, the curve of its arms, the splintered edges of the rockers grinding faintly against the floor. The rhythm was steady, purposeful. "Who's there?" His voice cracked. "Come out." The chair rocked faster. He swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temple. He circled slowly, edging around the chair until he could see its front. The flashlight beam trembled in his grip. No one. The seat sagged with age, cushion flattened, yet the chair moved as though cradling weight. Forward, back, forward, back. Carter reached out a hand, just to stop it, just to prove something real was moving it. His fingers brushed the worn wood, and the chair froze. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, directly behind him, the floor groaned. Carter spun, light slicing the shadows. The hallway behind him was empty, but the air felt crowded, as though something unseen stood inches away, watching him with unbearable patience. The rocking chair shuddered once more, just once, and then it stopped completely. Carter stood there in the silence, chest heaving, knowing he should run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Instead, his flashlight beam slid across the room and landed on something else. A bed, small, child-sized, and beneath it, scratched deep into the floorboards, were words carved by a trembling hand. "Don't stay."
Chapter 6. The Stretching Stairs. The words carved into the floorboards throbbed in Carter's vision. Don't stay. His pulse beat in time with them, each letter seared into his mind. He stumbled back from the child's bed, flashlight beam jerking wildly across the room until it landed on the chair again. Still, perfectly still. His chest heaved, every nerve in his body screaming that it was time to go. Now, before the silence thickened further, before the shadows grew another inch. "All right," he muttered, voice thin. "All right, that's enough." He turned, boots pounding against the upstairs hall. The doors seemed to lean closer as he passed them, their knobs glinting like watching eyes. By the time he reached the stairs, his flashlight shook so badly the beam fractured across the railing. He started down fast. The old wood bellowed beneath his weight, every step groaning louder than the last. Halfway down, the air shifted. It pressed on him, thick, like invisible hands on his shoulders. He slowed, against his will. The bottom of the staircase looked farther than it should have been. Carter blinked hard. The first floor stretched away, warped, the rug at the base unfurling into a length that hadn't been there before. He gripped the banister, breathing fast. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not..." He descended another step. The bottom receded again, like the house was dragging the finish line farther and farther from reach. Shadows pooled at the edges of the walls, stretching long and crooked. Panic surged. He bolted, stumbling down 2 steps at a time, heartbeat roaring. The door waited. He could see it. Faint light still spilling from the world outside, salvation just beyond. He reached the final step and lunged forward, and the rug beneath his boots buckled like water. He crashed down, palms scraping wood, flashlight clattering across the floor. Its beam spun drunkenly across the entryway, illuminating walls that seemed closer than before. The front door, had it been that far away when he first entered? No. No, Carter hissed, scrambling to his feet. No! No! He staggered toward the door. His fingers reached for the knob, brushed the cold brass. And then, the house exhaled. A deep, low groan vibrated through the boards, through the walls, through Carter's bones. He froze, hand on the knob. For one wild moment, he thought he felt the metal pulse beneath his grip, like the door itself had a heartbeat. And then, behind him, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs he had just fled. He spun, chest hammering, flashlight beam jerking up the staircase. The landing above was empty, shadows sagging heavy against peeling wallpaper. But the steps kept coming, invisible weight pressing down one by one. Carter's throat locked. He yanked at the knob, twisted, shoved. The door did not move. He shoved harder, shoulder braced, but the wood held tight, wood shuddering as though resisting him. The footsteps reached the final step. Carter slammed the flashlight beam toward the sound. The stair was empty, but the next board, the one directly in front of the door, groaned under weight he couldn't see. Something was there, close. He staggered back, heart ricocheting. The door behind him rattled once, as if mocking his attempts. And then, silence. The pressure in the air lifted, faintly, just enough for Carter to breathe. He staggered, gasping, sweat dripping down his back. He couldn't tell if the house had let him go, or if it was merely waiting, stretching the game out like a cat with a cornered mouse. His flashlight flickered, dimming, then steadied. Its beam fell on the guest book that was still lying open on the kitchen table. Pages fluttered in a breathless draft. The last line was scrawled in frantic ink, almost illegible, but Carter squinted and read it aloud. The house does not trap you. It waits until you stay. And the silence that followed was deeper than before. And from upstairs, the rocking chair started again.
Chapter 7. The Guest Book. The guest book lay open like a wound. Its pages fluttered in the unseen draft, the paper yellowed and curled at the edges as if it had been breathing for decades. Carter's flashlight trembled as he approached, the beam sliding over the spidery lines of handwriting. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. The wood shrieked against the floor and the sound made his teeth ache. He sat anyway, as though some part of him wanted to meet the house on its terms. The first entries were polite, ordinary. Dated from decades past, the neat script described summer visits, evenings by a fire, mornings filled with sunlight. Beautiful home. Thank you for your kindness. Names he didn't recognize signed each note, their ink faded but still legible. Then the handwriting changed. Midway through, the entries grew hurried, lines bent, words smudged, sentences unfinished. Strange noises last night. Thought it was the wind. Doors won't stay shut. They open again when I turn away. Something walked the hall. I heard it stop outside my room. I pretended to sleep. Carter swallowed, throat dry. His eyes tracked further down the page. It watches us eat. I don't know how, but it does. Don't look in the mirrors. The last 3 pages were smeared with scratches, as though someone had dragged their pen across again and again until the tip broke. But in between the lines of ruined ink, Carter caught fragments. Won't let us leave.
Stairs keep changing. It rocks when I close my eyes. He turned the page, palms damp. More entries, some dated years apart, others only days. A handful of names returned more than once, as if their owners had come back despite themselves. And then, near the back of the book, the handwriting sharpened. Large, desperate letters gouged into the paper. I think it likes me. It doesn't want me to go. I hear it in the walls. It's learning my voice. The next page was torn out entirely. Only the ragged edge of paper remained, stiffened and blackened as though burned. Carter sat rigid, fingers gripping the brittle edges of the book. His breath came shallow, each inhale stirring the dust that floated lazily in the beam of his flashlight. For a moment, he considered adding his own line, something small. Stopped here, noticed the chair, leaving now. A mark to prove he had been here and survived. But when he reached for the pen resting in the spine, his hand froze. The pen was warm, as if someone had just put it down. Carter dropped it instantly, the clatter loud as a gunshot. He staggered back, chair toppling behind him, heart hammering. The silence that followed was too heavy, like the house holding its breath. Then came the scratching. Not on paper, on wood. The sound crawled from the walls around him, nails dragging, rising, and falling in rhythm. It circled him, moving through the paneling, the floorboards, the ceiling, a chorus of clawing, as though the house itself was trying to write its own words into its bones. Carter snatched the guest book from the table and shoved it into his jacket, though he couldn't explain why. Proof, maybe, or a tether, something that might remind him this was real. The scratching ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The silence rolled back in. And in the distance, faint but clear, came a whisper that wasn't his. Don't stay. Chapter 9. The Locked Room. The hallway seemed longer than it had moments before. Carter's flashlight flickered, sending shadows skittering across peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards. Each step made the dust rise like smoke, and the whispers followed him, brushing against the back of his neck, murmuring his name in voices that were almost, but not quite, human. At the far end of the hall, a door stood out. Unlike the others, it was tightly closed, smooth and unbroken, its brass doorknob darkened with age. It seemed newer than the rest of the house, or perhaps simply untouched. But something about it made the air thrum differently. It radiated a weight, pressing on his chest like a hand demanding attention. Carter stopped. He hesitated. His hand hovered over the knob, skin prickling. The whispers seemed to hush, as though the house itself was holding its breath. "Hello?" he called softly. No answer. Only the faintest groan from upstairs, the rocking chair moving in slow, deliberate rhythm. He grasped the knob and turned. Nothing. The door didn't budge. He tried again, shaking it, pulling with all his strength. Solid, immovable. A shiver ran down his spine. The house sighed around him, the creak of floorboards, the subtle shift of the walls, the air thick with the scent of old wood and something sweet, metallic. Carter stepped back. He ran a hand along the doorframe. Something scratched against his fingers. Not the paint, not the wood. It was finer, deliberate. Fingernail marks, deep and jagged, like something had been clawing from the other side. "Who's there?" he whispered. His own voice sounded small, swallowed by the hallway. The door rattled, faintly, just once, as if replying. A shiver ran through him. He looked around. The walls themselves seemed to bend slightly, subtle curves he hadn't noticed before. The hallway stretched a fraction longer, narrowing as if the house was pushing him closer to the locked door. Carter tried to peer beneath it. The gap between the floor and the doorframe was narrow, but he thought he saw a faint movement, a shadow flitting just out of reach, impossible to identify. Then the whispers returned, louder, overlapping in a crescendo. "Stay. Don't leave. Come closer." He stumbled back. The rocking chair upstairs groaned in response, almost as if it were mimicking the rhythm of the whispers. Desperate, he tried the door one last time, slamming his shoulder against it. The house shivered, responding to his force. The doorknob rattled. The scratches deepened, as if whatever was inside the room had shifted, pressing closer to the surface. Carter stepped back, breath ragged, heart hammering. He realized something terrifying. The house didn't need to open the door to hold him. It had him. Every step, every sound, every thought, it knew. It could reach him without the door moving at all. The rocking chair stopped abruptly upstairs. Silence swallowed the hallway, pressing down on him, thick and patient. Then, faintly, from behind the door, came the sound of something sliding against the floor. Not wood, not metal. Something softer, slow, deliberate. Carter's hands shook as he gripped the guest book in his jacket pocket. He couldn't leave it. Not now. Not with the house watching, whispering, breathing around him. A voice, faint and wet, hissed from the keyhole. "We've been waiting." And in that moment, he knew the house had been waiting for him long before he arrived. Chapter 10. The Mirror That Watches. Carter moved slowly down the hall, leaving the locked room behind. The whispers lingered in the air like smoke, curling around him, brushing against his ears with soft insistence. The house had shifted subtly again. The floorboards no longer felt straight, the walls slightly leaning, bending inward. At the end of the hall, a bedroom door stood half open. Light from the flashlight falling across a small mirror mounted on the wall beside it. Its frame was wooden, simple, cracked at the corners. He remembered glimpsing it briefly from the staircase landing, but now it seemed different. Closer, sharper, more deliberate. Carter hesitated. His reflection stared back at him, pale and drawn in the dim beam. But as he blinked, he saw it shift. His eyes, his mouth, same, yet wrong. A faint smile curved along the lips that were his own, slow and deliberate, almost patient. He stepped closer. The reflection mirrored him at first, then began to lag behind his movements by a fraction of a second, twitching when he did not, tilting its head when he stayed still. His own hands rose, but the reflection's hands moved differently, curling into claws at the edges. Carter stumbled back, heart hammering. What are you?" he whispered. The reflection leaned closer, pressed against the glass as if it wanted to step out. Its eyes were darker than his own, the irises almost black, absorbing the flashlight's glow. A faint hiss slipped from the mirror, though no lips moved. "Come." His knees shook. He could hear the whispers again, louder now, crawling along the edges of the hallway, pressing against the back of his neck. The rocking chair upstairs began again, slow, steady, counting the seconds like a heartbeat. Carter's flashlight beam jittered across the room. Behind him, shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, curling at impossible angles. His reflection moved again, perfectly in sync this time, but only just enough to make him doubt his own motions. He reached for the mirror. Just to touch it, just to confirm that the cold glass was solid. The moment his fingertips brushed the surface, the glass rippled. His reflection smiled fully now, an expression alien and cruel. The whispers coalesced into a single thought pressing in his skull. "Stay with us." He pulled back, tripping over a loose floorboard. Dust rose, swirling like smoke, carrying the faint metallic tang that had followed him since the entryway. The mirror caught the light, splitting his reflection into 2, 3, dozens of overlapping faces, each one grinning, each one waiting. Carter staggered to his feet, heartbeat loud, pulse racing. He wanted to flee. The door at the end of the hallway beckoned, a promise of escape. But as he stepped toward it, the floor stretched beneath him again, elongating the hallway, twisting the space subtly. The mirror called him, silently, insistently, each reflection reaching out with hands of pale light. "Stay. Forever. Join us." Carter backed away, almost falling against the wall. His flashlight shook in his grip. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the hallway had lengthened again. The walls leaned inward, closing the space. And above all, the rocking chair had ceased, replaced by silence so deep it seemed alive, pressing down on him from every direction. He realized something terrifying. The house didn't just want him to stay, it wanted him to see, to watch, to become part of the rooms, the walls, the wallpaper, the shadows. And the reflection, the other him, smiled wider.
Chapter 11. The attic breathed. Carter climbed the narrow stairs that led to the attic, each step groaning under his weight. Dust rose in lazy spirals around his boots, and the air grew thicker with every flight. Upstairs, the house seemed quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that pressed down on the chest, heavy and patient. The door at the top was small, worn, and crooked on its hinges. A weak beam of flashlight lit the gap beneath it, and faintly he could see the shadows inside stretching and curling, even though the room was still. With a trembling hand, he pushed the door open. It groaned like a deep sigh, a sound almost human in its resonance. Inside, the attic was cavernous and low-ceilinged, filled with the remnants of forgotten lives, trunks, crates, chairs stacked in unstable towers. Dust motes floated in the beam, suspended as if time had stopped. Carter stepped inside. The air smelled stronger here, sweet and metallic, tinged with old wood and something sharper, like the scent of old blood. His flashlight beam swept the room, catching the jagged edges of floorboards, the frayed ropes of a hanging lamp, the warped panels of the walls. Then he noticed it. The floor beneath his feet moved. Not under his weight, but as if the house were breathing. The boards rose subtly, then fell slow and deliberate. The walls seemed to pulse,
leaning closer and then receding, as though inhaling and exhaling around him. He swallowed hard. The rocking chair's rhythm from downstairs had been replaced by a low, almost imperceptible thrum, the heartbeat of the house itself. Each pulse reverberated through the attic floor and into his bones. Something shifted in the shadows. A trunk lid slowly creaked, tilting upward on its own. Dust swirled, lifting like smoke as if stirred by unseen fingers. Carter raised his flashlight, swinging it toward the movement. The trunk was empty, yet he felt eyes on him. Dozens of unseen gazes. Welcome. The whisper was faint at first, then multiplied. The attic walls themselves seemed to murmur, voices pressing in from the corners, from the floorboards, from behind the stacked crates. They spoke in unison and in whispers, the voices of all who had come before. Carter stumbled backward, heart hammering. He tried to retreat towards the stairs, but the attic stretched subtly. What had seemed only a few steps now felt like dozens. Every turn of the head revealed another shadowy figure, crouched in corners or behind stacks of forgotten furniture. They didn't move directly at him, but they watched. His flashlight flickered, dimming as the attic seemed to close in. From above, the ceiling beams groaned and the walls whispered together. The house was alive in a way he hadn't understood before. Not just watching, not just waiting. It breathed, pulsed, and remembered. Carter's gaze fell on a small round mirror propped against a crate. Unlike the one downstairs, this mirror reflected nothing but the attic itself, except for a single figure standing behind him. Pale, too tall, the eyes dark, patient. When he turned, the space was empty. The whispers coalesced, a tide of sound pressing into his skull. Join us. Stay. Forever. The attic floor pulsed once more beneath him, strong and deliberate. The house inhaled around him, walls bending subtly toward his body. Carter realized with terror that he could not run. Not yet, while the house wanted him to see, to understand, to become part of its memory. And somewhere, in the deepest corner of the attic, he felt the slow creak of another rocking chair moving of its own accord, steady, deliberate, waiting for him to finally sit. The house had been alive long before him, and it would be alive long after.
Chapter 12. The Whispering Rooms. Carter's leg shook as he descended from the attic, careful to place each foot on the warped stairs. The house seemed to hum beneath him, the floorboards vibrating faintly, carrying a pulse that matched his racing heartbeat. Each step carried him deeper into the waiting folds of the house, where shadows clung thickly and dust swirled like smoke in the narrow beams of his flashlight. The hallway stretched endlessly before him, longer than he remembered. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar, faint whispers curling out from the dark. They spoke not in words, but in thoughts, memories that weren't his, feelings he didn't recognize. The house was teaching him its language. Come, stay, see. Carter stopped before the first door on the left. The whispers were louder here, insistent, almost pleading. His flashlight revealed a small parlor, its furniture shrouded in yellowed sheets. When he lifted one corner of the couch cover, the cushions beneath were indented, like someone had been sitting there recently. A soft voice, impossibly close, whispered in his ear, "Sit with us." He jerked back. The sound came from nowhere. The air itself seemed to carry it, curling around his mind, pressing against his thoughts. Panic rose in his chest.
yet a small, dangerous part of him wanted to obey. The next room, a dining room, held a long table. Dusty silverware lay scattered across it, but the chairs had moved, each one tilted slightly inward, as though facing him. The whispers here were louder, overlapping, urgent. "See the walls. Remember. Join us." Carter swallowed hard. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the voices, their peeling wallpaper twisting into shapes that resembled faces. He blinked, and they shifted again. Children, adults, all pale, silent, staring. From down the hall came the creak of the rocking chair, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat keeping time with the wall's whispers. He realized the rooms themselves were alive, each carrying the echoes of those who had come before. Each step he took was noted, recorded in the house's memory. He turned another corner, and the hallway twisted. Rooms he hadn't seen before appeared. A study, its desk covered in papers scrawled with names. A bedroom with the faint smell of something sweet and metallic. Another room with a mirror reflecting not him, but a shadowy figure standing behind him, gone when he turned. The whispers pressed more insistently now, threading into his thoughts, shaping them. "Stay. Forever. Don't leave." Carter shook his head, trying to clear the intrusion, but the house was patient. The longer he stayed, the more it fed on his attention, bending his perception of distance, of space, of reality. The doors closed slightly as he passed, narrowing the hall, elongating the shadows. The house was learning him, cataloging every fear, every hesitation. At the far end of the hallway, a door stood partially open. Through it he glimpsed darkness deeper than any shadow he had yet seen. The whisper swelled in a final urgent chorus. "Come, sit, stay, see, remember." Carter's legs trembled, his flashlight flickered, the shadows dancing wildly across the walls, echoing the movement of the chair upstairs. Every instinct screamed to leave, to run from the house that was alive, breathing, waiting, watching. But another part of him, small and curious, urged him forward. The house was patient, and it always got what it wanted.
Chapter 13. The Hall of Faces. Carter stepped through the door at the end of the hallway and froze. The room stretched before him, impossibly wide, its walls lined with frames of every size, each holding a face. Some faces were photographs, pale and cracked with age. Some were painted in oils, eyes glimmering with uncanny life. Others were carved or etched, expression frozen, mouths open in silent screams or wide, unnatural smiles. The air smelled sweet and metallic, a scent that made his stomach twist. Dust floated thickly, swirling in the flashlight's beam, revealing figures crouched in corners, silent and still, watching. The whispers followed him here, soft at first, then rising into a chorus. We saw, we stayed, we watched. Carter's heart thudded. The faces seemed to move when he blinked, turning slightly to follow him, eyes glinting with awareness. He realized, with a chill crawling up his spine, that this was the house's memory. Every soul who had stayed, every visitor who had entered and not escaped was here, trapped in some form, preserved by the house. A small cracked frame on the far wall caught his attention. A young child, no more than 7, eyes wide with terror. Carter felt an almost magnetic pull toward it, as if the child were reaching out for help. The whispers sharpened. Join us. Stay. Forever. He stumbled back, heart racing. Shadows gathered at the corners, elongating, reaching out with impossible length. The floor beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat, each vibration matching the whisper's rhythm.
The rocking chair upstairs groaned in slow, deliberate cadence. Carter's flashlight flickered, revealing more faces, dozens, hundreds, each one frozen in the act of seeing him. Some screaming silently, some smiling cruelly. He realized that the house didn't just remember them, it had shaped them, twisted their presence into the walls, the frames, the shadows. A whisper directly behind him made him spin around. The hallway was empty, yet the voice was inside his skull, not outside. We are here, waiting, learning, seeing. Carter pressed himself against the nearest wall, hands trembling. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Every instinct screamed to run, but the house had already begun reshaping his perception. The door he had entered through seemed farther than before, the hall behind him stretching like taffy. He turned back to the faces. One of them, the child, was no longer just painted on the wall. The eyes blinked, the mouth opened, forming a wordless scream that pressed directly against Carter's mind. Stay. The whispering rose to a roar. Faces twisted, eyes widening impossibly, mouths opening and closing as if speaking in unison. Shadows coiled from the corners, stretching toward him, brushing his shoulders, tugging at his jacket. Carter's flashlight fell on a small plaque beneath the frames. Names. Hundreds of them, etched in tight script, some scratched out, some overwritten. Each one corresponded to a face above. And the last line, fresh and dark, read, Carter, you belong next. His legs gave way. He stumbled backward, falling against the wall, the weight of hundreds of watching eyes pressing down on him. The whispers became words now, clear and sharp. Stay. Forever. Join us. See. Remember. Carter's chest heaved. The room pulsed, breathed, and seemed to draw him in. He realized, with icy clarity, that the house didn't just trap bodies. It trapped minds, wills, souls. Every visitor was catalogued, preserved, remembered. And now, it had chosen him. Above, the rocking chair creaked once, then stopped. Silence filled the room, heavy and patient. He knew it was waiting for him to make a choice. Stay or lose himself to the house entirely.
Chapter 14. The Echoing Footsteps. Carter stumbled back from the Hall of Faces, his mind reeling. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows coiling as if the house were alive, breathing, stretching. He felt the weight of the hundreds of eyes on him pressing into his chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hallway ahead had lengthened again. The staircase he had climbed earlier now seemed farther than memory allowed. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Not his own, not upstairs, but behind him, soft, deliberate, echoing through the house with unnatural precision. Each step measured, in rhythm with his own heartbeat, yet impossibly separate. He spun, flashlight beam slicing the air, but the hallway behind him stretched empty. The footsteps grew louder, circling. They weren't above, below, or beside him. They were everywhere at once, resonating through the walls, the floor, even the air. Carter's stomach dropped. The house didn't just watch him, it followed him. It moved for him, around him, reshaping itself to keep him inside. He ran, stumbling over warped boards, flashlight flickering, shadows crawling along the walls, lengthening unnaturally. Doors appeared where none had been, disappearing where they should have been. The hallways twisted subtly, elongating with every desperate step. The stairs he tried to descend seemed to rise into infinity, curving impossibly toward the attic once more. Stay! The whisper curled through his mind, overlapping with the echoing footsteps. Carter's breathing became ragged, every exhale loud against the walls.
He swung the flashlight wildly, catching glimpses of shadows moving independently of the light. Figures crouched in corners, peeking from behind doors, faces pressed into the peeling wallpaper. All of them, watching, waiting. He reached the dining room, heart hammering. Chairs that had been lined neatly were now scattered, tilting inward as if leaning toward him. The table stretched impossibly long, groaning under some invisible weight. And then the footsteps converged, sounding directly behind him, each echo reverberating inside his skull. He whirled. Nothing. Just walls. Empty space. But the floor beneath his feet shifted. Boards rippled like water. The door to the entryway, his only hope of escape, receded, moving farther into the shadows. Forever. He tried to call out, scream, plead. Nothing escaped his throat. Only the echoes answered him. They weren't his own footsteps anymore. They were the footsteps of everyone who had come before him. Each step, a memory trapped, walking endlessly in a rhythm the house controlled. He stumbled back, flashlight beam swinging, catching glimpses of a rocking chair in the hallway, moving slowly, deliberately, in time with the invisible march of echoes. Dust swirled in the beam like smoke, curling around him, forming faces that whispered his name. Carter realized the terrifying truth. The house could reach him wherever he went. It could manipulate space, distance, walls and floors. Every escape attempt, every turn, every step was catalogued. Every fear he felt became part of the house itself. The footsteps grew louder, converging, circling. Carter's legs gave way. He fell to the floor, forehead pressed to warped boards, breath shallow, mind reeling. The whispering rose to a chorus, pressing into his skull from every direction. Join us! Stay! Forever! Above him, the rocking chair ceased, silence falling suddenly, thick and heavy. Carter knew, with a cold certainty, that the house wasn't done. It had been waiting. It would wait until he finally became part of it.
Chapter 15. The Window That Never Led Outside. Carter scrambled toward the nearest window, desperation fueling his legs. The hall of faces and the echoing footsteps still haunted him, each step heavier, each shadow curling closer. He threw open the window, expecting night air, a chance to leap and run into freedom. But the pain didn't reveal the world outside. Instead, the landscape beyond shimmered, warped. Trees stretched impossibly tall, their branches curling into spirals like black smoke. The moon hovered too close, pale and enormous, casting light that twisted across the warped ground. When he tried to climb through, his hand slipped against the sill, and the view shifted, a subtle movement that made him feel dizzy and nauseated. He backed away. Another window, same result. Every frame showed night, twisted, unnatural, unwelcoming. Nothing familiar. No road, no town, no stars. Only the house's vision of the world outside, manipulated, reshaped, hostile. The whispers grew again, pressing into his mind. There is no outside. There is only us. Stay. Carter's flashlight flickered, the beam slicing across the warped walls. Shadows clung more tightly, stretching along the floor, along the peeling wallpaper, coiling around corners where no wall should have existed. The house's pulse thrummed beneath his feet, echoing the rhythm of the rocking chair he could still hear, faintly, somewhere above. He tried to ignore the windows, tried to focus on the door, the stairs, any path that might lead out. But the house was bending reality around him. Doors shifted, hallways curved, distances elongated and shortened with subtle cruelty. Every escape route led him back into the same hallway, the same watching shadows, the same pulse of the floorboards. He pressed his hand against one window, then another. The glass was cold, smooth, and unyielding.
Behind the panes, the warped night pressed toward him, alive with subtle movement. Trees bent slightly as if breathing. Shadows slid across the distorted ground, crawling toward him. He staggered back, heart hammering. The whispers became urgent, insistent, circling his mind. Join us, forever, see, stay. Then from above, the rocking chair groaned once, slowly, deliberately. Its rhythm synced with the pulse of the floor and the whispering voices. The house exhaled. Carter realized the terrifying truth. The house didn't just trap him inside its walls, it trapped him inside its perception. Every window, every door, every hallway could be twisted. Every attempt to escape was already anticipated, already reshaped to feed the house. He sank to the floor, flashlight shaking in his hands, dust swirling in the beam like smoke. The shadows along the walls leaned closer, the faces in frames flickering, stretching, whispering. We have always been waiting, and now you are part of us. The night outside the windows remained still, warped, eternal. Carter knew, with chilling clarity, that the house had never intended to let him leave. The world beyond was only a reflection of its own will, and he was trapped inside the living memory of the house. Above him, the rocking chair stopped. Silence pressed down. The house waited, patient, eternal.